All right, we have our case study. This is an interesting one. It was for a startup organization. GistLens does a fair bit of work with startups, so a lot of our case studies come from startups. They had a tech lead that had developed their systems and had been there for a couple of years, and then decided that they were ready to move on to do something else. Now, the issue is that they had a fairly small team, and they needed to fill this big gap that this person, they knew everything about all the systems, and they had to, somehow replace this person. We were consulted to assist on hiring, and our particular role in that was technical screening. So our job was to make sure that whoever we hired was actually technically capable of carrying out the job. And we were also part of the overall hiring panel, so attended the interviews and so forth. Now, the actual screening process that was, it was pretty typical, the sort of thing that you've probably seen in a whole bunch of organizations all over the world. It looked at their experience. There was a technical assessment involved, and this person that they ended up hiring did really well on that technical assessment. They had a panel interview. They really impressed the panel. Everyone, loved this candidate, and so they were hired. Now, I've put a question mark there on the slide, as in the result. Given that this is a case study, I'm pretty sure, you can all imagine that the result was not quite as good as had been hoped for. Fast forward a little bit of time. This person that they had hired nearly destroyed the team. They had got it to a point where the people that they were supervising couldn't stand there anymore, couldn't stay, so they resigned. And it turned out that this person, even though they had the technical skill, this particular startup, the management team was really focused, as you often are in a startup, on funding rounds and talking to investors and so forth, and had missed that, like the dynamics of what was going on in the team, not been paying it enough attention, and the thing had spiraled out of control, and they basically destroyed the development team. The key word there being nearly destroyed. They did catch it just in time, managed to remove that person from the role, and did recover the development team before they ultimately just said, no, forget this, I'm out of here. I've got better things to do with my time, and have now commenced a new hiring round to kind of fill that void. They were lucky, I do believe that, in the sense that not that the whole thing happened, but that they didn't lose their team overall, and that they did manage to remove that individual without doing any more harm than had already been done in ultimately the way that role had been conducted. When I reflected on what went wrong, because something obviously went wrong. In fact, several things went wrong to get to that point. That individual should never have been staying that long in that job. Ultimately, something at that company meant that had been possible, which it shouldn't have been possible. But how did that person get through the hiring process? What could we have done better that could have prevented that? Because I can tell you, there aren't many companies that will necessarily survive not of that size, that will necessarily survive something like that. The psychometrics were missing. Okay, there was no way of uncovering the kinds of behaviors that person may present in the role. People can say one thing in an interview because everyone knows what to say in an interview. People know what you want to hear. But if you have some way of sort of getting behind what it is that they'll tell you to actually the kind of behaviors that they will exhibit when they are in the role, then that's where it becomes quite valuable, that process.